Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Product People live stream event. I'm Ashal, your host today, and with me we have a very special guest, Chetan. Before we start, I would like you to scan this QR code and answer answer a question, a very open question. This would help us understand the audience that we have, and from there we would start the session. The topic for today's live stream event is the commercial-minded product manager. We have with us Chetan Pandya, who is the VP Product Growth at DAZN Group, and he will be sharing his insight as a commercial-minded product manager. Before I hand it over to Chetan, I would like to give a quick introduction about myself. I am a product management consultant here in Product People, working for almost 3 years. I've worked on several different products. I have a background in software engineering, and yeah, super happy to be here, not only in the live stream event, but also in Product People. What do we do? So we are basically interim product management consultancy firm. We do product operations, transformation, acceleration services. These are the services that we basically provide, and we have our in-house staff. We also have free events, talks for the largest PM communities in Europe with over 50,000 members. If we would really, when it comes to balancing product development and commercial outcomes, you could describe your content approach by being more product focused, mostly commercial focused, and we also make sure that we have a balanced approach, and that's if you are still figuring out what you need to build, so that's also where we can help you with. With that, I would like to hand over the presentation to Chetan, who's going to present on the topic of commercial-minded product manager. Over to you, Chetan.
Thank you, Vishal. Very excited to be here. I'm Chetan Pandya. I'm SVP Product Management at DAZN. Let me start by sharing my screen. And let me know when you can see my screen.
It's visible.
All right, super. So just a quick one. Chetan, SVP Product at DAZN. DAZN is a global leader in sports streaming service. We have boxing in UK, Bundesliga in Germany, Serie A in Italy, La Liga in Spain, and fairly recently we've also added NFL to the portfolio. So it's an extremely dynamic and very fast growing organization. Just a bit about myself and my background and my introduction into product management. I started my career at Party Gaming, and this is essentially a gaming organization which is now called Entain Entertainment. From there, I moved to a startup with UNICEF, where we launched UNICEF's first charity lottery in Norway. We ran that for about 3 to 4 years. And then I moved to Pragmatic Solutions, where I had the good fortune of working with some phenomenal developers and product managers. And we built a world-class iGaming platform before moving to DAZN. The whole conversation on commercial-minded product management and commercial-minded product manager is one that I've experienced over the years. And what I wanted to share in this conversation was how we look at the different nuances of being a commercial-minded product manager. Now, I'll move to the next slide. What is it that you should expect out of this conversation?
Chetan, can I please request you to make your presentation in presenter mode, because I think we can see your next slides as well. So it would be nice if you could do the presenter mode.
Sure thing. Let me do that. Let me stop sharing first. Is this fine or
This is perfect now. Thank you.
you see only one slide? You don't see the
Yeah.
secret sauce that I have
Awesome.
behind all of this. Okay, good, good. Okay, moving on to the next one. As I was saying, towards the end of this session, what I expect is that we should have an understanding of why it's critical to be commercial-minded product manager. What are the key challenges that we are facing on the product management stream of that there are plenty of challenges, and how is it that we start a journey towards becoming more commercial-minded? Move on to the next slide. Mashal, just to refer, everything is fine. You still see the one slide?
Everything is perfect now.
Fantastic. Okay. So before we jump into the why and what and the how, I want to set some context. And this is something that we always talk about in terms of why and where and how product management came into existence. And it's really something which was discussed during the 1930s when Neil came up with the concept of brand man. Now, he at that time came up with the concept of brand man, but I think it's brand, what he meant was brand man and brand woman. The idea was that they were looking for someone who takes end-to-end responsibility for the overall success of the product. And this is something that has always resonated when you work as a product manager, that you take the responsibility of end-to-end in terms of customer service, customer experience, and all the other nuances. And this sort of became the blueprint for the product management. The idea of product management is to be a healthy intersection between technology, user experience, and business. And this is all to set the context to ensure that as a product manager, you cannot afford to lean on either technology or user experience or business too heavily. Maybe we can talk about this as an example, right? The idea of subscription services that is at least more than a decade old was when all the organizations and all the companies realized that having a constant stream of revenue is fundamental. And a very good example here is with Netflix. When Netflix launched the streaming service, the business connotation was that once we have a subscriber, let's make it difficult to cancel the subscription. And I'm not singling out Netflix. It's essentially what I've seen in many organizations where it's extremely difficult to cancel subscriptions once you've signed up for it. Netflix took a different route, and that's because they weren't leaning too heavily on business. They started leaning towards user experience, that it's ultimately the customer. Let's make the journey extremely seamless, extremely easy. If you want to cancel it, no problem, you can cancel. And there are multiple studies done to actually show that by making the journey seamless and easy for the customer to cancel, they actually increase the retention. And multiple customers were able to not only cancel, but then they would resubscribe. So if you look at this example, it tells you that product management needs to be a healthy intersection between technology, user experience, and business, and not to lean on one way or the other. So with the context set, we can talk about why it's critical for you, for everyone, to be commercial minded when it comes to product management. The first conversation we always have is as a product manager, you're essentially collaborating with multitudes of teams. You've got sales, marketing, finance, legal, engineering, and all of these team members that you need to align with. And all of these team members, if you're able to align with, the impact on the whole business is that much more better. Essentially, your customer should be hearing the same message from multiple sources. So it's critical because all of these alignments end up actually improving the product and function that you're launching as part of your organization. The second part is by being commercial minded, you're essentially maximizing the return on investment. Now, we all know that product development is an extremely uh, significant investment of time, of money, of resources. So when you have all of these cost factors to consider, your ability to be commercially focused will help you prioritize features, will help you prioritize initiatives. And this is something that you can provide in terms of considering a product feature that gives you better ROI, gives you best return on investment. And this, in the end, ensures that the resources or the team members or the bandwidth that you're using uh, are being used efficiently, are actually focused on what will bring maximum value to the company, to the organization, or even to the customer, right? Uh, Increase effectiveness, or I can even map it up with the sustainable growth. Any product that you work on, the core essence of it is to generate profitability for the organization, right? To generate revenue for the organization. And the reason I mentioned this revenue and the profitability is because that is the underlying factor that ensures sustainable or sustaining growth over the longer term. So by being commercial minded, you're ensuring that you're in a unique position to balance your short-term wins and also your long-term strategy. And that's essentially that part of increased effectiveness. Last but not the least, existential need for product manager. Now, why I say this, I find this slightly ironic. I find this slightly funny. Over the course of my career, when I was working as a product manager, I never introduced myself as a data-driven product manager or a customer-focused product manager, or in this case, commercial-focused product manager. I've always believed that it's a it's an ingredient to be a successful product manager, to be a good product manager, that you ought to be data-driven, you ought to be commercial-focused, and you ought to be customer-focused. Now, all these conversations on data-driven and customer-focused, they probably deserve a larger conversation on its own. For the part of this session, we are focused on commercial minded product manager. So I think fundamentally it's an existential need for a product manager to be commercial minded. Now we talk about why it's critical to be commercial minded. We can talk about the key challenges that product management is facing. And I've highlighted only three. I'm pretty sure there are a lot more challenges that other product managers have felt. But essentially, the loss of strategic focus, shifting priorities, and decline in the role definition. So let's start with the loss of strategic focus. And it's not to say that back in the days when we had the waterfall model, and I remember writing 300, 400 page documents, which almost nobody read except me. The idea from moving from waterfall to agile, where we have short-term deliverables. The idea was not to move product management from long-term goals to short-term deliverables, but there are researches conducted by companies such as Bain, which actually show that in certain tech firms, the product managers are stuck in an extremely outdated role. And suddenly the focus, rather than being from the customer or business, is now you need to ship a product on time and within budget. And if you refer back to that conversation or the slide we had where we said product management is a healthy interaction between technology, user experience, and business, what you're doing here or what you see here is that the focus is completely leaning on heavily on technology. Now, it's not the fault of agile. It's not the fault of processes. It's essentially organizations or possibly even product management, which has started focusing more on deliverables as opposed to, am I able to achieve the strategic goal? Am I able to deliver this product, which is going to bring an aha moment for my customer? So that's one, the loss of strategic focus. The next one is shift in priorities. This is an interesting one. The shift in priorities is, to an extent, a global phenomenon, right? It's not something that individuals have brought upon. It's not something that you on your own can change. And this has been essentially over the last 3 to 4 years. I've seen a remarkable shift towards more short-term profitability, or even sometimes we refer to as cost cutting, right? It's a lot easier to cut the cost. It's a lot easier to put the buffer on the expansive roles such as product management. Because if I were to deliver something short-term, I possibly don't need somebody who is going to do a long-term vision or is going to think of strategic growth. And this shift in priority is also been another unwelcome gift from COVID, where companies were forced to cut down. And my conversation with the fellow product managers or the leaders in the industry have a similar experience that over the last 3 to 4 years, they've seen a slight change. In fact, a paradigm shift, I shouldn't say slight change, a paradigm shift in how product management is conceived. And there are examples out there. Zomato has moved delivery partners to product managers. The one example of Airbnb is potentially fairly old, but the idea was that the rules of product management was something where you could mix or match functions to create something which is slightly hybrid. And this shift in priorities from the organizations, from the companies, which could be also a byproduct of economic uncertainty that we are facing, puts a potential challenge on product management. And third is the decline in role definition. This, I think we should take accountability from product management on creating this decline in role definition. And this has been something which has been observed, that the roles are increasingly diluted. And one of the reason, as we mentioned, was that if a product management function is spread too thin across various modules, it creates this lack of RACI. And when I say lack of RACI, it's essentially for any product, any feature, any organization to succeed, there needs to be a clear RACI matrix. Who's responsible? Who's accountable? And when you start spreading resources too thin, you essentially break the mandate and you create confusion. And that is where you get products where you have resources who are neither responsible nor accountable. And another trend that we have observed, and again, this is not fairly new, it's been for quite some time. When I worked at American organizations and I dealt with the product managers there, they were fairly marketing focused or market focused, shall I say. And then I look at Europe, where there's a lot of focus on deliverables. I find a healthy cusp in UK where you have commercial-minded product managers and you've got delivery-focused product managers. And then you add Asia to the mix. Because Asia had this history of being the outsource solution provider, the development or the evolution of product management has been delivery. And hence you see sometimes product management, which there's product manager, there's product owner, there is even BAs, and this creates a role definition where you start declining the remit of a product manager. So multiple challenges for product management, and they're not alone in terms of challenges that the product management faces, but these are the ones which are at a global scale that all of us are facing. So we talked about why it's important to be commercially minded product manager. We talked about what are the challenges that we are facing. And now we can talk about how we can look at being more commercial minded. And this is where I possibly will spend some more time. First and foremost, the alignment of product with business goal is fundamental. And this is something that we speak very fondly with all the other product managers, right? Your product roadmap, something that you're extremely proud of. Your product roadmap has to align, the prioritization has to align with the company's overarching business objective. Now, at different stages, companies have different objectives. So you need to understand how your product is going to contribute to these goals and how every decision that you make within your purview impacts the bottom line. Let's take an example. You're a streaming service provider. You've got a healthy base of customer, but obviously that's not enough. Your goal is global expansion, right? So now you want to start understanding that I've got lots of customers who might be interested in merchandise. So Disney Plus has done this experimentation where I watch a lot of Star Wars. I'm very very drawn towards the sci-fis. I'm watching The Mandalorian. The show finishes, then I get a pop-up or a message that says, "Hey, would you like to own a figurine of Mandalorian?" That takes me to a merchandise system, which Disney Plus does not own. It's an outsourced service. But the conversation here is that being a streaming service provider, which is the core competence of Disney Plus, they're trying to expand into merchandise. Now, as a product manager, if I were to work on the merchandise integration for Disney Plus, I know that as soon as I launch merchandise proposition in Disney Plus, my goal is not immediate revenue because it's a strategic decision. It's going to take slightly longer. It's going to be a slightly longer curve because I've got to integrate the customer experience. I've got to ensure that all the customers who are watching the streaming service because of which they signed up may or may not be as interested in merchandise. So again, what you're doing here is by being aware of the fact that merchandise is a strategic decision and not something which is going to create short-term revenue, you're able to focus and you're able to prioritize it, and you're also able to align your teams. The second, collaborating with cross-functional team, and this is lifeline of every product manager. You speak to finance, sales, marketing, operations, customer service, legal, almost every team within the organization. Because the idea here is that the more you speak to these stakeholders, the more you ensure alignment and the more you're able to leverage their expertise. Let's take another example for this point. I'm adding a new payment method because my customers feel the need of this particular payment method. My business case is pretty solid. It says, yes, if I bring this payment method, it's going to increase conversion. Technology is fairly happy. So I've made sure that the intersection is all aligned. However, my finance team has an absolute nightmare to deal with because I've ignored data reconciliation. And this is what I mean by collaborating with cross-functional team. So the more you collaborate with your with various teams in your organization, the stronger your business case is going to be, and the stronger the outcome of this particular product or feature is. You essentially will start speaking their language, and you'll also start framing your product decisions by keeping in mind that all the outcomes are aligned, not just with the team, but also with the vision of your company. The fourth part, make data-driven decisions. Now, in this we talk about your gross revenue, your net revenue, whether you are going to achieve these numbers. If and when it's connected to the customer, what's the customer lifetime value? By implementing this particular feature, am I increasing the customer lifetime value or am I decreasing the value? You also have to think of the customer acquisition cost. Now, when I throw these KPIs on the board, it's not that you end up owning all these KPIs. These KPIs sit in different functions and different teams. But remember the brand man or brand woman definition that Neil postulated. The idea is that you are taking end-to-end responsibility of not just the success, but the failure of the product, right? You ought to own the failure as well. And while you're making these decisions, the understanding and the conversation that you drive should always be based on these KPIs and these data figures. If you don't have them, the idea is to acquire them, right? And this will help you understand. In fact, this will help you create a deep understanding of your customers' needs and behaviors, and ultimately their willingness to pay. So every organization, small or large, that we worked on, you can get tons of customers through the gate, but if the customers are not willing to pay, it's almost all for nothing. Let's take an example for this particular instance. For every payment initiative, there are essentially three key modules: cost, conversion, and risk. So if I'm adding a new payment method, I need to think of the cost factor. Is it going to cost me more or less? For example, credit card, debit cards have maybe 2 to 3% fee. Apple Pay possibly 15 to 30%. Conversion, maybe it's very convenient to get these customers through the door. For example, credit and debit card cannot compare to the convenience that Apple Pay offers. I'm so used to Apple Pay that I don't remember last time I used the 16-digit credit card numbers and everything. And then finally, the risk. Yes, the cost makes sense. The conversion is that much faster because it's extremely convenient for the customer. Business is happy, customer is happy. But am I opening the floodgates for fraud? Now, if it's way too convenient for a customer to make a payment, is it way too convenient for the customer to file a chargeback? And that has another snowball effect. So the example here is that by putting all of these in a data-driven manner, you're looking at every aspect of your feature and product to understand the data points. And last one, this is again, these are all personal experiences consuming data every day. And I remember one of my previous managers, Ian Turnbull, and I'd been product manager for few years. And he had a habit of looking at data every morning. Like he would step into the office, the first thing that he would look at is this red and yellow and white dashboard on Excel sheets. We still worked on Excel sheets. And I thought that looks really interesting. So I looked at the dashboard and I couldn't make any sense of it, right? I had gross revenue, I had net revenue, I had bonus, I had promotion. Then there was deposits and cash outs, and there were 20 payment methods. Each payment method had a different conversion journey. And to make matters worse, we are playing at a global scale, right? So you've got 5 or 10 different markets. And that's not enough. You've got partners who do certain different aspects. So looking at these dashboards, I couldn't make head or tail. But I remember Ian saying, habit becomes character. It doesn't matter that you don't understand anything out of this. Just sit, go through it, try and consume it. And I would sit through it. And within a couple of weeks, it took me a couple of weeks. I was not that sharp. It took me a couple of weeks to understand. And after that, when I would look at the dashboard, it started creating a trend. Because you start looking at the data, you start understanding what is it that you're looking for, and you start seeing the trend. And I think that's where the strength lies. You have to make this a habit. You have to do this consciously. And I know the tendency is that you walk into the office or in your home office, depending on where you work, grab a cup of coffee, uh, you check your emails, or maybe you check your chat messages, right? And that's how your day starts. And then you become completely busy in tacticals and operational activities. You ought to, in my case, I book my calendar for 15 minutes in the morning so nobody else can book my calendar. And those 15 minutes, I'm just absorbing data. I'm just learning about what's happening, what's working, what's not working. And that would be um, my experience, which I think would sum up the fact that as a commercial manager, as a commercial-minded product manager, uh, why you need to be more commercial focused, what are the challenges that we're facing as product management, and ultimately how you can start your journey towards becoming more commercially focused. With that, I'll bring this to conclusion. And as I mentioned earlier, it's an extreme privilege to be here. And I'm happy to connect with anyone over LinkedIn or through other channels, and then we can possibly have this discussion on a separate forum.
Thank you, Chetan. This was a great presentation. If you could please just stop sharing your screen so that we can share Slido where people can ask us questions.
Thank you, Michelle. I'll just go on mute for a minute.
Sure. Right. So all those who are joining us from LinkedIn and YouTube, please feel free to send us your questions. You can use this code on Slido or scan this QR code from your phones to ask any questions you might have for Chetan. While you compile your questions, I will tell you a bit more about product people, some of the use cases where you can engage with us and come to us for our services. We actually provide interim fractional product management roles, or we can also provide product leadership roles. While you are hiring for a position, a product management position that would take 3 to 9 months, that's where we come in. We can cover for those 3 to 9 months. We can also cover parental leaves. And if there are any urgent initiatives that you would like to deliver or discover, we can definitely be a great help based on our expertise. We also provide product coaching or consultancy. If you have a new product management team, we can definitely come in and provide coaching to that team. We can streamline your processes or programs from 0 to 1 for startups and for big companies as well. Last but not least, we also provide product discovery services to discover your next impactful product. And we can also happily run a low or no code pilot MVP. These are some of our clients that we have worked with so far, including Zalando, DeepL, Blinkless, Emma, Douglas, and many more. Some of the stats that we are very proud of, we have supported 300 cross-functional teams. We have 42 product leaders and product managers in-house, and 62% of the team is women, and out of which 66% is in the leadership. And with that, I would like to read a few of the questions that you might have. You can send your questions on LinkedIn, or you can send your questions on Slido or YouTube. So, Chetan, we have our first question. This is, what frameworks or methodologies do you use to evaluate products' commercial potential before launching it into market?
All right. So I think there are a couple of methodologies which are out there. One of them is, I think, RICE, where we talk about the various nuances where you can prioritize it. The one that I personally use is a very simple model of effort and benefit. And I say that because ultimately the value that this particular feature or the product is going to bring versus how much effort is required for us to achieve this. That's one of the most common frameworks that I've used to understand whether there's a commercial aspect. Now, it's tricky in various organizations because if you're working in a gaming stream, the KPIs are fairly different. If you're working in online streaming, the KPIs are fairly different. If you're working in retail, that's fairly different. So essentially, every organization will have three top key KPIs. I say key KPIs. Actually, it's KPIs. You have three KPIs, and then based on your conversation with your deliverable, with your technology team on what's the effort for us to launch versus what's the value. That I would say keep it as simple as you possibly can.
Cool, thank you. Next question is, growth is enhancing the commercial mindedness of a product team. Do you see growth leadership roles becoming more strategic, like product leadership roles?
That's a good question. So I think 5 years back, growth possibly wasn't as heavy with product management, whereas I've seen a lot of leaning towards the growth aspect. Now, I know that organizations tend to gravitate between long-term strategy versus short-term, but I felt that whether your organization is trying to achieve short-term goals or it has a long-term vision, the leadership and growth continues to be extremely valuable because it's exactly the same individual that will pivot between short term to long term. So I think, if anything, growth product management is essentially going to solidify itself even more compared to the other roles.
Cool, that's an interesting insight. Third question, can you please share an example of making a B2B or B2C commercial impact with product objectives? For example, product objective caused retention or activation, impacting X% revenue.
Fascinating. So when we built an iGaming platform, which was essentially a B2B platform, we had the exact same challenge. The point of building a platform is that you're creating a single source, which can then be sold to multiple clients. The way we would measure KPIs is that on the same platform that we built, I had about 15 clients. Out of 15 clients, two of them would make, say, million a month, whereas the rest of the clients are making maybe 10,000 pounds a month. Now, these are all using the same platform. So me as a chief product officer of that platform organization, my goal was always to build the feature sets that can be used by all of these clients. But then it was essentially the way in which these clients use these features that would differentiate them. So my KPI would not be the acquisition. My KPI would not be the marketing, because that, as a B2B platform, that's not something which is under your control. It's essentially the client who's bringing the traffic. But my KPI used to be the value or the return on investment that each customer brings. And that potentially was the key KPI that I would look at. Whereas once you have created a solid base of client, you would know that out of these 15 clients, you've got your top 3 clients, which are making almost 80% of the revenue. And I think this is not just true for B2B, but it's also true for B2C industry. And that's where the whole concept of VIP customers came in. We had 100,000 customers, but we realized when we dig deeper that it's 20% or the 10% of the customer base that's bringing 80% of the revenue. And that's also true in the B2B. You will have your 2 or 3 outliers. And then once you have identified your outliers, your product roadmap prioritization becomes that much more linear, because then you can, in essence, work with these 2 outliers and build the roadmap on top of it.
Interesting. I think this will be our last question until we get more. But this question is, what do you think about sacrificing revenue to gather data in an initial MVP launch? For example, pricing little less to gather more users to better frame the data. Does it make commercial sense?
It's a tricky one. I'll tell you this cognitive phenomenon called the Zugler effect. And there's this idea of cognitive bias that we all have. When we don't know something at the beginning of our career, the confidence level is too high, because you think I know this. And as you start learning more and more and you start experiencing more and more, not that you lose the confidence, but you start getting more and more humbler in your opinion. And the outcome is that when somebody asks you that question or that kind of a topic, the response is almost always, it's tricky, it depends. And I'll give you an example. We had this startup with UNICEF, and we were trying to set the costing for the lottery ticket. Now, lottery ticket by in itself is meant to be super cheap, right? The idea is to actually reach mass audience. And this debate was always there. That should we lower the prices compared to a competitor so that we can attract a lot of customers, hence we can gather a lot of data, or we increase the price and make it exclusive. From experience, and again, doing 2 or 3 of these, I have seen that lowering the price hasn't really yielded great result. And I tell you the reason for that. Once you lower a price, you've gotten your customers used to a certain price threshold. After that, it becomes extremely difficult to increase it. And I've seen at least 40% drop in customers as soon as there's a marginal increase in price, because for some reason, the customers feel cheated. They feel like I was the early adopter. This was the price setting that was there. And then as soon as you started doing good, you started increasing the price, which is the common fallacy that we face. So I think there are possibly other methods that we can use to capture data, as opposed to just increasing the price. Because once you increase the price, it's gonna stick with you. So yeah, just be careful.
Cool. Fifth question. What processes or frameworks do you have in place to evaluate the predicted ROI of your specific product initiatives? As a new PM, I find this aspect very challenging.
Again, this would be very specific to an industry that you're working at. Maybe okay. So there are 2 frameworks here. Once, anything and everything that you're doing ought to be to solve a problem, right? And I think this is one of the very early lessons we had, that the tendency is always to go with the requirement. I want this. I need this. but the most important conversation that you can have is what's the problem that you're trying to solve, or as we say, asking the 3 whys or the 5 whys, essentially getting to the root of what the problem is, and from there you have customer value that you think you will generate with this versus the business value that you will generate from this, and this really depends on the industry that you're working on. So let's say streaming service, right? For us, footprints is very important. For us, it's very important that we are able to engage customers. It's very important that we are not only able to engage customers, but we are able to engage customers for longer. For the customers, those values are slightly different. So I would say, depending on the industry, uh, you would have to define those key measurables that you want to look at. And then you would start with the customer value and the business value.
Any resources you can recommend to keep building up commercial focus as a PM?
I subscribe to Financial Times. I read it. And that's again, I wasn't interested in reading that newspaper, but this is essentially one of the things I did when I thought that. So here's an example, right? I'm having a conversation with my marketing stakeholders, and they're all talking numbers. And I'm sitting there talking technology, or I'm talking deliverable. And there in itself, this need grew that no, I ought to understand what the numbers are. And like I said, right, this whole concept of reading newspapers or reading data points which talk about information. Harvard Business Review, by the way, is another one that you might want to subscribe to. That's a very data driven. I very regularly consume the content. The another practical advice I can give is, every time I've moved organization, my first port of call when I joined a new organization is, who's the data person? Where does the BI team sit? And I've had some fantastic friends with backgrounds in BI, and this was all down to the curiosity of, can we see the numbers? So I would say, wherever your BI person or your BI team sits, first thing you do is go bring them, a box of donuts, make friends with them, and then try and understand how the data points are working within your organization. But yeah, that possibly one of the few practical advices I can give that I've used.
Cool. That was our last question, Chetan.
Yeah, super.
Thank you so much for all the answers. We're going to wrap up the live stream while you stay on call. I'll just tell a little more about Product People, and then we will conclude the call. So Product People is hiring currently. You can look into our open positions by scanning the QR code that you see on your screens. You can also subscribe to our very interesting newspaper that we really work hard on. And it's pretty interesting if you want to have insights about what's happening in product in general. Our next live stream would be with Abdu, who is the CPO and presentations coach. The topic would be a massive opportunity for product people. So feel free to attend this live stream that is happening on 8th of October. And with that, thank you very much, everybody, for joining in. Hope to see you all in the next live stream event.